That's a great question. Thanks. So to back up and give some background and context to that, I was an employee of Bristol Myers Squibb, where I worked on I co-led the initiative to include sexual orientation, gender identity, intersex status data collection in our clinical trials. And so we rolled that out to all qualifying clinical trials in 2023, got our first patients in 2024. And we only allowed this data collection if the study was using a SitePad, right? So it was a private collection where the patient had an iPad and they themselves, disclosed their SOGI data, and it was an opt-in system. So not all sites had to activate the questions, and then patients themselves had the opportunity to answer. And we found that only 50% of the sites actually activated the questions. And then of the sites that had active questions, only about 50% of patients did answer them. So part of my doctoral work was kind of digging into the relationship between the investigators and their opinion of the utility of the data, because that we found in literature was driving force of compliance. And what we see is there's a huge kind of gap, right? So we know that sexual orientation, gender identity is a social driver of health and can impact health outcomes. But a lot of people don't think, in a medical setting, that it has any impact on clinical outcomes in clinical trials. So we shouldn't collect the data because there's no association. And I found, again, in my doctoral work, that on the whole, investigators do not believe it's important to collect. And a lot of them ranged from, well, all my patients get the same level of care anyway, so why would I ask? To, in a medical setting, we should never ask because what's in a person's head doesn't matter. And then, then some people were like, well, if it was relevant to the study outcomes, I would. And then, we had someone, a site coordinator in Florida, said, I work with elderly patients. I do not want to ask these questions. One,
I get that.
and then another one, all the way to in this kind of gamut of answers, we had someone saying, we need to be careful, and we the safety of the patient is paramount, under GCP and everything. So we should ask, but make sure that, the patient's taken care of. So I think, again, there's a gap of understanding of what those clinical outcomes are and why it's important to collect these data. And so, yeah, that's usually the first question, when we would present to the other clinical team. So I was a clinical scientist at the time, and I would present to the different functions at Bristol Myers. And, the first question we always got was, well, what does it matter? Right. And so we really tried to bring home this is scientific in its basis. This is not woke. It's not DEI. We are scientists. We are healthcare providers. And these are social drivers of health. And if you want your outcome measures to be accurate and representative, epidemiology 101, you need a representative sample in order to generalize your conclusions. And we don't know if our trials are representative or not, because we don't even ask the questions.